First of all, I wanted to thank the organizers for this opportunity to share the work I've been doing in several orchestras with you here today. And I feel very fortunate to do this for a living. I work with the things I love. I have a passion for my work. And, well, as a matter of fact, many of those who hire me to do the things I love are sitting here today. So thank you for bringing me here today to share all this knowledge with others who have not applied it or perhaps don't know the projects I've worked with. The key project I'm discussing here is Adopt a Musician project. It's pretty much the Anglo-Saxon project model. It's highly interactive and with high participation, particularly of the audience, of the listener. We don't want our audiences to remain passive. We want them to play an active role. And although it's a learning model in different stages, elementary school and secondary school, it branches out and generates plenty of possibilities that can be extrapolated to different contexts or situations like social projects or integration projects. The Adopt a Musician project was first implemented in the National Spanish Orchestra back in '05. And Joseph Pons, the one who brought over Marguises, who was the founder and developer of the program, was the first step. And now the project is being implemented in other Spanish orchestras. But since it started off with the National Orchestra, that's the one I will talk about. I have hours and hours of contents about seminars, classes, concerts, but as I prepared my conference, I got so carried away with all those videos that I didn't set up anything new. So I brought up my old material, which, by the way, is subtitled in English. So I'm using this material from the National Orchestra, and perhaps I will sprinkle a few anecdotes about other orchestras. And since an image is worth 1,000 words, rather than explaining the project and then showing the video, I think it would be more interesting for you to watch the video, and then I will explain how the project was developed.
Pero sin duda, donde mejor se engloban los objetivos de nuestro proyecto educativo es en el programa Adoptar un músico. Esta propuesta, que acerca a los alumnos de educación primaria y secundaria al corazón mismo de la composición musical de la mano de los músicos participantes, fue puesta en marcha en 2004 por el pedagogo musical Marc Withers, a instancias del maestro titular Josep Pons, tras más de 2 décadas implantada en Reino Unido. Este modelo implicativo, desarrollado en el programa Adoptar un músico, propone trasladar el interés por la música y por las artes en general a las aulas. Desde su primera edición, Adoptar un músico cuenta con la inestimable colaboración del Departamento de Artísticas del CRIF Las Acacias, que coordina y gestiona la selección de los centros educativos participantes, así como la formación del profesorado. El núcleo del programa es el trabajo directo de niños y jóvenes en torno a la creación musical, de la mano de instrumentistas y cantantes de la Orquesta y Coro Nacionales de España, dispuestos a compartir con ellos su experiencia artística y su escenario habitual, el Auditorio Nacional de Música, donde, como cierre de cada proyecto, los alumnos ofrecen en concierto sus propias creaciones, mostrándose como compositores e intérpretes a la vez. En definitiva, los participantes tendrán la oportunidad de sentirse no solo público activo, responsable y crítico, por conocedor del lenguaje que se maneja, sino también, y fundamentalmente, intérpretes y compositores. Se garantiza de este modo el aprendizaje significativo. Aprendemos más y mejor cuando somos protagonistas en primera persona del hecho educativo. Este nuevo planteamiento supone una mayor implicación por parte de los músicos de la orquesta y coro nacionales, al tutelar y guiar la actividad de manera presencial en los centros educativos que participan, reforzando los vínculos afectivos con la música a través del conocimiento personal de sus intérpretes. En este sentido, el proyecto educativo posee el valor añadido de la formación en este campo de miembros de la Orquesta y Coro Nacionales de España, realizada de forma paralela a nuestros proyectos. Los encuentros y vivencias experimentados dejarán, sin duda, una huella indeleble en todos los participantes, alumnos, profesores y músicos.
Okay, it's a short video, but I think you probably get more or less the way it works. It doesn't show the process, which is what I'm going to talk about, but you do see the final outcome, which is a concert where, as you heard, the kids, the participants, share stage and experiences with professional musicians. And I point out, for instance, that most of the musicians we looked at there, which Rogelio said, in the National Orchestra, over 40 musicians have gone through this project, but it's the soloists that are taking part and very active role. It's young people and they suggest their own projects and they move and dance and create their own proposals, and they bring musicians and orchestras closer to the young people. And we saw that one of the pictures was not kids, it was a vulnerable group. RAI is another foundation we work with, and they work with the homeless. And so we get them to come in as well. They work for about a week, and then they go and watch one of the dress rehearsals of the orchestra with the music they've been working on. And that's why I said earlier that although the project is basically educational, it also has a social or a community side. And I've chosen this as the cover because you can see Antonio Arias, the flutist, and a girl next to her with a electric bass guitar. And the thing is that the plan is for the kids to express themselves with their own tools. If they play another instrument, they can use it, or they can use their voice, their body. We'll see how it works. And this model, as I said, is very interactive. It's all about action because you retain that much better. You're not just a spectator in a concert. If you take part during a period of about 3 months, working with the musicians in the classroom, obviously that experience, if it ends with a concert in a hall, in a theater where you normally see the orchestra, it really sinks in much more deeply. And the project, although it has a similar pattern, and I'll explain the stages in case you're interested in how it's organized, it's not always identical. We always try and look at the context in which the project will take place, who will be taking part, whether it's primary school kids or secondary school youths, or whether we'll be working with music students or with people who have not had any musical training before. If we're working with a particular social group, women or people who are in prison. So we first look at the people we'll be working with, and then the context in which they live, for example. Well, as well as working with the National Orchestra, in Adopt a Musician, we also work with in Seville and in Bilbao. And it's quite different when you work in provinces that have their own very strong folk music than in Madrid, where this is not so present. So in projects in Seville, even though we might work on something else, there's always a flamenco element. In Bilbao, we also use popular music and local instruments, chistu and other percussion instruments, and you have to keep that in mind when considering a project, not to standardize too much, but to connect them to the community and to the local context. The artistic value, I think, is important beyond it being an interesting project as a process, and of course it's the work in process that really matters, but ultimately there must also be musical quality and value. Of course, we're not working with professional musicians or artists. We can't lay the weight of the whole performance on the soloists, but the kids must feel that the musical outcome is worthwhile and is artistic. They must see it as such, not just as a show, but as something that artistically has value. And I say multidisciplinary because I think it's important to always have a combination of different artistic disciplines, to have a visual side to the performances, choreography, and in music, perhaps, of course, you don't have painting or literature directly, but you know that it was there somewhere in the process as an inspiration, or the music, when the music was composed that they're working on, such and such a book was being written, or this was the style of painting that was fashionable, so it can be used to explore other artistic fields. Collaboration between different institutions, I think it's very important. Just like we have to take advantage of the folk and popular music of the place, we also have to stay in contact with museums, libraries, because you can build really interesting synergies and have projects that will be mutually enriching. For instance, with the National Orchestra, we had the Art and Music project, where it was this project, Adopt a Musician, extended to the Thyssen Museum. So we worked with the paintings of the Thyssen Museum, writing music based on them, painting paintings based on the music, and so on. It was a really interesting partnership. And now we're collaborating with the National Spanish Library through composition of minuets for a quartet, and that's one of the Adopt a Musician projects we're doing with the National Library. And for example, collaboration between a theatre that's promoting an opera project and schools in the city, like in Seville. The Maestranza Theatre proposed to produce an opera, which was another experience in which a large number of schools from the city and cultural institutes became involved and ran the project, and also collaboration with foundations. With the National Orchestra, for example, we've worked with the Antonio Gades Dance Company, carrying out a social project around the Fuente Ovejuna Ballet with a group of women at risk of social exclusion from the Tomillo Foundation. So that was another way of designing a project which then gave rise to a performance at the National Auditorium. So these are the collaborations. And another aspect of this model is the emotional impact. As I said, everything that we experience, everything that you take part in actively, really sinks in much more deeply than when you just attend the concert as a listener. It can really move you, but not always and not as deeply. So I think the depth of these kinds of projects is a lot greater. And as I said, launching this project back in, well, it was in 2004, but the concept was in 2005, with the National Choir and Orchestra Association, because there's also choirs, not just orchestras. 2010 with the Symphony Orchestra of Seville and Bilbao, and this year in the Symphony Orchestra of Castilla y León. The objectives of the project are to bring music to students or other groups by composing and playing music under the guidance of musicians from the orchestra or choir. This is the important thing, working side by side with musicians who help them compose and create and who share with them. The kids are aware of the fact that they're sharing their lifestyle, their theater on the day of the concert, and it's really exciting and a very nice project. Another goal would be to give teachers in the schools and resources that they can turn into part of their own educational repertoire. And this is the case because I've been told by a lot of teachers, particularly female teachers, because of course there are a lot more female teachers in this area. Perhaps there are more female music teachers, period. But I was often told that after taking part in a project of this type, when they go see a concert or a dress rehearsal, they use the same mechanism to work. Instead of using other exercises, they do these musical composing and performing activities. For example, kids go and see a concert. They told me that they went to see Hosts the Planets, and she worked on 3 planets in the classroom, used some musical motifs and developed them, and they played them with the children. And then when the children came back from the rehearsal, they said, well, the ones I liked best were these 3, because of course we had played them already, and we knew them. Because they hadn't actually performed the real score, but they did feel involved in the concert, and that's what you achieve. So we all learn something, the students, the teachers, and of course the musicians too. And I want to speak about musicians too, because the project is called Adopt a Musician, so I think I should also praise them for their work. And of course not all orchestra musicians collaborate in the same way, but there are a lot of them who really are dedicated and who are enthusiastic, particularly the younger people, but some not so young who really get excited and involved and enjoy it tremendously. And that's why you need to increase the awareness of musicians, these sorts of projects, because they themselves provide training for the musicians, because they have to deal with the realities of the world of education. Right there in the schools, and they guide the students around the auditorium, show them where they work, where they play, and it's educational for the musicians themselves too. Of course, these are voluntary activities, but others don't really know what it's about or are not too enthusiastic initially, but eventually they realize that it is wonderful training for them as well. I spoke about educational projects for primary, secondary education, others for music schools or conservatories, not so common, but in this project I mentioned in Seville, we worked with the city's conservatories. It was those kids who played the music in the pit, and the singers were from the choir, so it was a collaboration from music training itself. Social inclusion, we have, again, vulnerable groups like the one I mentioned, these women from the Antonio Gades Foundation, prisons, prison inmates. With the Seville Orchestra last year, we were at the Seville 2 prison, and it was really moving. Of course, you have to adapt the projects in order to carry them out in this kind of setting, hospitals. Of course, they're music students, but they are with their school class. And so for kids who study the clarinet in a music school, and then in their secondary school, they play as soloists for them, it's also an additional benefit. And this project, for example, just from last year or 2 years ago, is a mixed group, primary and secondary school kids. Usually it's either or, but in this case it was a mixed project with 4 schools, usually. You have the ones in yellow, the ones in small ones in white in the middle, and they're all playing together. There are some pieces that they all play together and others that they play separately. And the participants, generally 4 schools, although it depends on the size of the room or the hall, it can go up to 6. And the groups are generally 30 kids, because that's the usual standard classroom size. There's a teacher in charge, which is usually the music teacher, and then a support teacher who helps them when they have to go to the rehearsals and so on. And 4 musicians from the orchestra or the choir or whatever entity, as many as schools in the project, because each school will adopt a musician. And going back to the Produce an Opera project in Seville, they didn't adopt musicians there. The kids, music students, were in the pit, but they adopted the technical staff, because what they did was professional training centers and art schools in Seville designed the sets, the costumes for Humperdinck's Hansel and Gretel. So they had music schools and professional training centers in Seville, and they adopted the technicians from the theater, lighting, costumes, sets, makeup, and so that was more like adopt a technician, really, adopt a designer. And for everyone involved, whether it's musicians or whomever, it's really exciting to take part in that process and see how the kids become involved, and ultimately you come up with a project that we can all be proud of. And perhaps at some point they'll have an adopt a manager, and you will be able to enjoy that process too, which I'm sure would be lovely. Normally the projects last for a quarter, school quarter. There's the meetings, you go to the school with the musicians, and then there's the final concert. How can you adapt this for other projects, social projects? It's difficult to have them last 3 months, because these groups are not always able to maintain or sustain the effort for so long. It's Seville too, the prison. What we did was to concentrate everything into a week. And so in the afternoons, I would go there to the prison with some of the musicians from the orchestra, who are also working on an adopt a musician with children that same quarter. So you can optimize resources, because these musicians who are working with children in the schools were, of course, very dedicated, and they agreed to also take part in the prison project. We worked 3 afternoons with the inmates, and that was really amazing. And it was all about a concert with the orchestra on Friday. So we worked Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the prison on the repertoire surrounding Carmen and Seville. So it was music from Carmen and opera overtures around Seville, and they made their own musical proposals, they wrote poems and drew, and we designed a concert before that orchestra concert. So on Friday they had their own production with these musicians from the orchestra, they had their own concert, and then the orchestra performed. And it was really very moving, as you can imagine. And that's why I said that you need to adapt the projects to the different settings. You can make them shorter, longer, but always maintaining the interactive nature and the fact that it's work with the musicians from the orchestra, and there is a work that, or a repertoire that the participants will hear the orchestra perform, either the concert or the dress rehearsal.
¿Dónde se lleva a cabo? Pues en los centros
And this
educativos
happens, of course, in the
los centros
schools
sociales,
or in
donde
the social
sea que
centers
se
or
organice,
wherever it is
y
that
en el
will
auditorio.
be taking place,
Entonces,
and
es
in the
importante,
auditorium.
teatro,
It's
que sea
important,
la
the
sede
auditorium, the
habitual
theatre,
donde las
wherever
orquestas
the
tocan
orchestra
habitualmente,
usually
los
performs.
chavales van a ir a tocar.
That's where the
Van a ir a ver
kids
un
will go and
concierto y van a
play
ir a
and
tocar.
watch a performance.
Las fases del proyecto,
Stages of the
desde que
project,
empieza a gestarse hasta
from
que
design
termina,
to finish,
son pues la selección de
are,
las
well,
obras,
first, of course, the
que siempre
selection
se
of the
seleccionan
works that are
dentro
always selected
la programación de la temporada de la
within
orquesta.
the
Entonces, elegimos
season
un programa
program.
que nos
So we
interese,
select
por
the
ejemplo,
program that
temáticamente,
we are interested in
musicalmente,
because of the theme or the
que
music,
coincida también en el
and
tiempo
which
dentro del calendario escolar, que nos pueda
fits with
resultar interesante
the school
porque
year
tengamos 3 meses de
calendar,
trabajo previo,
because we
o
can
que no
have,
porque
say,
en junio,
3
porque es
months,
mala época, en fin,
and make
todas
sure
estas
no,
cosas
it's
que hay
not
que tener
June
en
because
cuenta a la
it's
hora
the
de
exams.
programar
So you have to
con
keep those things in
estudiantes.
mind when you're going to
Seleccionamos
work
las
with
obras
students. You select
y,
the work
elaboración
and
del
then
cronograma, obviamente, como para cualquier
come up with a
proyecto,
timeline like for any
difusión
project,
del proyecto y selección de
disseminate the
participantes.
project,
Aquí
select
habitualmente se suele
participants.
contar con
Usually
los
here
departamentos
we
de
work with
educación,
the education
con las
departments
consejerías de educación
and the
de
regional
cada
education
provincia
ministries
correspondiente,
in each
o
region.
habitualmente, o no, porque por ejemplo en Bilbao
Or
lo
maybe not,
hacemos
because in
y se
Bilbao
encarga la
we
propia
do
orquesta de
it,
hacer la
and it's the
difusión,
orchestra
o bueno, pues son los colaboradores
itself
que
that
tengan,
does
pero vamos,
dissemination.
si se puede contar con educación, pues
But
siempre
if
facilita
you
bastante.
can work
Porque
with
aparte,
people from the
si
Ministry
se
of
cuenta con
Education, it's
educación,
always
es
useful.
posible
Also because
articularlo de tal manera que a los profesores de
you
los
can
colegios
organize it in such a
les
way
den
that the
créditos, por
teachers will get
ejemplo,
credits,
les
for
den
instance, for
puntos
their
para sus
participation,
promociones internas y
or
tal.
get
Entonces,
points
pues,
for
eso es muy
their internal
interesante,
promotion.
que les reconozcan la formación.
So that's
Después se
important
hace el
too.
diseño de la propuesta, los materiales didácticos, porque nunca
And
una
then, of
propuesta es
course,
igual.
there's
Se
the
ve, bueno, pues mira,
proposal,
de esta
the
suite vamos a
materials,
trabajar sobre tales
and say, well, we're going to work on these
movimientos, esto lo vamos a
movements
hacer
in this
entre
suite,
todos, aquí va a haber
and
solistas,
we're going to
hacemos
do
un poquito
this
el
together,
diseño
and here there will be
previo
soloists, so
y
you
repartirlo
design,
entre
and
los
then
centros.
you
La
share
quinta,
it
muy
amongst the
importante,
schools.
formación del profesorado y de
And
los
then, of course,
músicos.
teacher training and
Se realizan
musician
unas
training.
sesiones
That's
previas
very important,
conjuntas de
because you have
profesores
to
de la
find
orquesta y profesores de los centros
time
educativos
for
en
joint
los que
sessions with musicians
se
and
pone un poco en
teachers,
práctica el material didáctico
where you
diseñado
combine
y un poco
or
las
apply the
fórmulas y las
material that
pautas
has
de
been
trabajo.
designed,
Pues desde
and
decir, mira,
start
pues vamos a utilizar los
deciding,
pinatos
say,
sobre
we're going
este
to
ritmo que
use
utiliza Stravinsky aquí,
this
o
beat that
podemos
Stravinsky
crear
uses
a
here,
partir
or
del
we can
argumento,
start
o vamos a tomar
on
tal
based on the
frase de
storyline,
esta obra
or
y
we're
vamos a
going to
hacer un ritmo
use
de ella, en fin,
this
cosas muy prácticas,
sentence
pero
from
a
this
nivel de trabajo de los músicos.
opera,
Que a ellos les resulta muy interesante porque
and they
muchos,
find it really
a mí eso al
interesting.
principio me costó un poco
And
darme
I
cuenta de esa
actually found it a
realidad,
bit
¿no?
difficult
Y no sé por
initially
qué,
to
porque yo
realize
estudié en
that. I don't know
conservatorio
why,
y
because I
debería ser
studied in
más
a
consciente que
conservatory
nadie
and
de
I
eso.
should have known better
Pero
than
que
anybody,
parece
but
que los músicos profesionales que
it
están en las
seems that the
orquestas
professional
deben tener una
musicians who are in the
capacidad de
orchestras
creación e improvisación
must
sí,
have the
para
ability
nada.
to create and
Son muy
improvise, and
pocos
yet
los
they
que
don't.
per se
Very
tienen esa
few,
capacidad y esa
to
facilidad.
start
Hay
with,
algunos que sí.
have that
No
kind of
quiere decir que se
ability
nieguen
or
a hacerlo ni
talent.
que no, pero
Which
simplemente
doesn't
que
mean they
dicen, no, no, pero
refuse or anything, they just
guíame
tell
un
you,
poquito. Y un poco ese es
well,
nuestro
tell me
trabajo,
how
¿no?
to do it.
Guiar de
And
qué
that's what we
manera, qué
do,
pautas dar para que ellos puedan crear. Porque lo de
to
improvisar
help
pues
them
no nace así dado.
create, because it's
Después pasamos a los talleres
they're
en los
not
centros
necessarily good at
educativos.
it. And then we
Actualmente
start
suelen
with
ser,
the workshops in the schools.
pueden ser 2, 3 talleres. Yo siempre intento que sean 3
You can
talleres
usually have
en
2 or
centros
3
educativos, me
workshops. I try and have
parece
3
óptimo.
in
Uno
the
más o menos
schools. I
por
think that's the
mes o
best
cada
number.
3
1 a
semanas, un
month or
taller
every 3
en el que
weeks or
yo me
so.
desplazo al centro educativo
I
con
will go
el
to the
músico
school
adoptado.
with the
Y
adopted
trabajamos in situ
musician,
durante un par de
and we
horas
will
con los
work
chavales.
there
Luego,
with
entre
the
visita y visita,
kids.
los
And then
profesores y
between
los
visit and
alumnos siguen
visit, the teachers
trabajando
and the students will
y cuando
continue to
volvemos
work on
tienen
the
ya nuevas
project, and when
propuestas
we
o tienen
go back,
desarrolladas
they
las que hemos
have
hecho.
new proposals or they've
Muy
developed the ones
importante,
we made.
después, los
And
alumnos
then,
asisten
it's very
al ensayo
important, the
general de la
students
orquesta.
attend the dress
O sea, su
rehearsal.
músico les
Their
muestra
musician will
su
show
trabajo,
them
les
where
muestra la
he or
obra
she
sobre la que están
works and
trabajando.
the
Si están trabajando
piece they're working on.
sobre
If it's
Sherezade de Rimsky-Korsakov, van a ver a la orquesta
Rimsky-Korsakov
cómo
Sherazade,
toca
they will see
esa
the
Sherezade que ellos
orchestra
están viviendo
performing the
como
Sherazade that
creadores,
they've
¿no? Cómo se
been
están inspirando en Sherezade
working
para crear,
on as
pues ahora van a ver la
creators.
obra original. ¿Vale? A veces ha pasado
And
de ir a un
sometimes
ensayo general y
what
decir a los
happens is you go
chavales,
to a dress
oye, profe,
rehearsal and the
pero es
kids
que no la
say,
están tocando bien, es que
oh,
no
they're
es
not
así,
playing it
porque ya
properly, that's
consideran
not the way it
que la
is,
obra es la
because they
suya,
feel
¿no?
that
Y a mí eso me
their
parece
their
realmente
one,
muy
their
bonito.
performance is the real one. And I think that's interesting because they recognize the melodies, they recognize the rhythm or the essence. Even if the melody is not the same, they can identify this particular sound and style of each composer. And then there's the dress rehearsal for the project, and the students prepare their performance, their final concert, and the evaluation. In the final concert, I'll be really brief because I think I'm running out of time.
El concierto final
final
habitualmente suele ser
concert
concierto de los
is
alumnos,
usually the
con sus
student
músicos adaptados.
concert with
Pero lo
their
ideal
adopted
es como
musicians.
se empezó a hacer
But
originalmente
ideally,
en la que era concierto
as
de los
it
alumnos
was done
y
initially
segunda parte en la
with
que
the
la
National
orquesta
Orchestra, there
interpreta
was a first
la obra
half
original.
with the
Esto
students, and then after
en
the
Sevilla se
interval,
hace así, por
the
ejemplo, y
orchestra
tengo que agradecer el
performed the
compromiso de la
original
orquesta en
work.
ese sentido porque me
This
parece
is
que
what
lo
was done in
muchísimo.
Seville, and I think it's
Y,
the
por
best
ejemplo, fijaos, esto es lo que
thing to
dice
do.
uno de los músicos, Miguel Domínguez,
And one of the
clarinetista de la
musicians,
orquesta,
Miguel
sobre eso.
Dominguez, who's a
La
clarinet player,
participación directa
what
en
he
un
says
proceso
is that
creativo
the
mediante
direct
propuestas
involvement
dirigidas
in this
intentando acercar a
project,
los alumnos estos aspectos que quizás sirvieron al
trying to
compositor de
help the
inspiración,
students to
acerca
think
a
of
estos
those
alumnos
aspects that
privilegiados de una
inspired the
manera muy especial al
composer,
proceso de creación musical.
lets the
Esto ya por
students
sí solo
become
es una
involved
experiencia muy
in the
positiva e
creative
interesante.
process, which
Pero el
is in
momento más
itself a
especial de
very
este
positive
proyecto es el que al
experience.
vivirlo
But the
piensas que
best
realmente
part
ha
of this
merecido la pena el
project,
trabajo
what really
y en
makes
el
you
que
think
todo
that
cobra
the effort
sentido,
was
no es
worthwhile
curiosamente la puesta en
is
escena
not
de sus
actually
propuestas.
the
Para mí se
performance of
produce en
their
el momento en el que
proposals.
los
For
alumnos
me,
escuchan
it's
en
the
el
time
concierto
when
la
the
obra
students
original sobre
listen
la que
to
han
the
trabajado
original
y creado a
work
su manera,
during the
justo
concert,
después de sus propuestas,
right after their
con sus músicos
proposals,
adoptados entre la
with the
orquesta.
musicians they
Sin apenas
adopted
darse
in the
cuenta, están
orchestra.
valorando de otra manera lo que escuchan, de
They
una forma mucho más directa y más
value what they're
cercana. No hay
hearing
más que mirar sus
in
caras,
an entirely
de una
different
manera que
way. You only
entienden
have to
mucho
look at their
mejor, como
faces.
si
They
hubiesen
are
vivido un
really
proceso creativo parecido del
understanding
compositor,
the music
de una
as
manera
if
que
they
les
had gone
permitirá
through the
a muchos
creative
en el futuro un
process side by
acercamiento
side
de
with
interés
the
diferente
composer.
por este estilo que
And that
muchos
will
veían
enable
bastante
them
más distante.
to
Entonces fue cuando
develop a
sentí
taste
que
for
el
this
proceso de
music.
adopción vivido
That's
había
when I
sido muy
felt that the
fructífero.
adoption process was really
Como
worthwhile.
me parece muy... Ya.
Okay, I've run out of
Vale,
time.
pues
All
ya
right.
está. Bueno, pues
Okay.
nada, muchas gracias
Sorry.
a
All right.
todos
Well, thank you very much,
y
everybody.
nada,
And
paso a la
that's
siguiente.
it.